Okay, so thanks for joining us again. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about Sage Inventory Advisor. Sage Inventory Advisor, for those who don't know, is a cloud application. It integrates with Sage financial systems worldwide. And the main focus around the application really is to help with planning of your inventory, forecasting, and replenishment of items. Okay, so typically what would happen is if you were running a Sage financial system, we would integrate with that system. We would pull stocking information, purchase order information. We would then use this information to do our calculations, our forecasting, and then produce results. Firstly, producing recommended orders at a push of a button, recommended um, IBTs or transfer warehouse transfers at a push of a button, and even in the case of a bill of material, we could recommend works orders when that manufacturing needs to start to make sure we have enough stock. Um, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the benefits that we're trying to achieve with the application, and on average with most of our customers worldwide. Um, we've seen the big drivers really are to try and reduce the inventory, and you can see here with between 10 and 25%, um, to help increase the cash flow in the business and make sure we're not tying up cash where we don't need to improve your fill rates, to make sure that we're not stocking out, that we're not losing sales, and also not losing customers because of those loss of sales. So obviously in any business, that's very important. So how do we run as lean a business as possible as far as our inventory is concerned, and at the same time make sure we have the highest availability to our customers to make sure that our sales increase? We also want to significantly reduce the time that it takes for planning and forecasting. Typically, in small to medium businesses that we've been involved with, we see that this type of forecasting or planning usually takes place in an Excel spreadsheet. Um, and it's usually very labor intensive. There's usually only one person that understands that spreadsheet and how the calculations are done. And it's not the best way to plan. It's very reactive. It's not proactive, and it takes up a lot of time to work through items one by one in a spreadsheet and make decisions on buying. So we really want to take all that work away from the planners, and make sure that we can give them results at a push of a button, so that they can spend their time doing what they need to do, which obviously is working on forecasts and making sure those forecasts are as accurate as possible, and then at the same time negotiating with suppliers and making sure that the supply is coming in as well. Okay, so better inventory visibility. You'll see in the application, we try and make everything as visual as possible so that you have all the information you require about that inventory item, and then also making sure that we have the right inventory in the right place at the right time. Okay, so those are really the benefits that we're trying to drive with this application. So to start off with, I'm going to talk a little bit about, and it's a bit of inventory 101, but just to give you an idea of what we do in the background to be able to give you the results that we do, and all the clever stuff that we're doing with the information that we're pulling from the ERP. So the first thing that we do is that we classify items. So obviously in the business, we want to know where the most important items are, and we want to be able to concentrate on those. Typically in business, there might be an ABC classification of items, or maybe fast movers, high value items. So what we do is that we use an ABC, the Pareto methodology, where A typically is 80% of your cost of sales. If you have a look at my A line going across over there, B would be, let's say, 16% of the cost of sales, and then C would be the last 4%. Then what we do is we intersect that with our 80% movers. So high is 80% of my unit sales, medium would, let's say, be 16, and the last 4% movement in low. So you can see as these intersect each other, we highlighted there in green, those are the most important items in the business, and those are the items that we want to concentrate on. Obviously, we want high target fill rates on these items because these are the items that are driving our business, um, and we want to make sales. Okay. Over here in the blue and the red, we can see the last 20% with the last 4%, both movement and cost, sitting in this red block over here. Okay. We also highlight in these 80%ers over here, the fast moving, inexpensive items. Okay, so these are usually little bits and pieces, part of a bill of material or little spares. They're critical to service, even though they don't have a high cost. They're still very important to the business. So we want to have high target fill rates of these items over here as well. Whereas the slow moving expensive items, even though they're great for turnover, if they're only turning a couple of times a year, we want to make sure that we don't get caught with too much of that stock. So even in those sections over there, we have these two highlighted blocks that we will obviously procure in a different way. So from these blocks, we're then going to drive inventory policy. Obviously, a target fill rate. You could see there, I've got high target fill rates of 98% in my green, whereas down here in the red, I have a 90% target fill rate. And what that really means is that we're trying to overcome 90% of the risk against the items in this block, and we're trying to overcome 98% of the risk against those items, obviously because they're more important. And that would also affect your safety stock calculation and the amount of stock that you hold, because obviously we want to make sure that we don't stock out of these green items over here. Okay, so that's the classification, and we use a 12 rolling month history. So as the items maybe move from one block to the next, we will automatically reclassify them, and we'll automatically change the purchase policies for those items. So no more classifications and trying to find out where the fast moving items are and where the bread and butter items are of the business. We automatically do that, and we automatically manage that on a monthly basis. Okay, so the next bit of automation that we do that's pretty clever is the forecasting. Okay, so we have a forecasting engine. It has 20 different forecasting algorithms. It will take those algorithms and run those in a tournament fashion at the end of every month, and we will try and find the best fit forecast for that item in that location. So there might be things like seasonality. In this case, you can see there's some seasonal spikes here on this fit. There might be upward or downward trends. It might be a box Jenkins. It might be an intermittent demand. Whatever the forecast is that we find that best suits the history, we use to forecast 12 months ahead, and then we will build your purchase plan against that forecast. If we find a better forecast the next month, we will use that. So the idea is to get more accurate forecasting than you would perhaps in a spreadsheet with a sort of moving average forecast. People usually get caught out with that when it comes to seasonality and trends, as well as spikes in demand. We have a certain amount of outlier elimination built into the application as well. Okay, so that's the forecasting engine. So now we know how important the item is. We've also now found a forecast for every item in every location, and we're forecasting 12 months ahead what we predict to be selling of that item. Once we've done that, we then want to calculate our safety stock levels. So how do we calculate optimal levels on every single item in every location? The first part of that is the safety stock calculation. Now, this is really important, and this is probably the part that's where all the magic really happens in the application, is that we can create a risk profile for every single item in every location. And based on that risk, we will then create the optimal safety stock days. So obviously how important the item is and what your target fill rates, as I said, will be have some effect on that. Your replenishment cycle, in other words, how often you purchase the item, would have an effect on your safety stock days. And then obviously your lead time. These all affect your safety stock days and how much stock we'll be holding. Then we also look at things like supplier risk and forecast risk. So supplier risk, as you can see over here, we're tracking your purchase order history. We're having a look at whether you've got early deliveries, whether you've got late deliveries, whether they're on time, and we're calculating an average lead time and we are comparing that to the stated lead time from the supplier. So in other words, if a supplier says, in this case, my stated lead time is 90 days and my average lead time is 55 days, on average, we're getting these items really early. Okay, we're not waiting 90 days before the items come, and because of that, we can take 30 days out of our safety stock. And what that really means is that we're shrinking the lead time based on what we're seeing coming out of the average lead time. Obviously, if there were a lot of late deliveries, that's quite important because that might turn into stockouts. We would then increase the safety stock and stretch that lead time to try and overcome that risk. We also look at things like whether you were supplied in full or whether you were short supplied, and we will apply a risk against that supply of that item in that location. So here we're taking some days out of our stock. We're also looking at your forecast risk. So yes, we have these great forecast algorithms, but we know obviously that forecasting isn't an exact science, and there are going to be forecast variances. So we look at, on average, whether we're under forecasting or over forecasting, and we try and overcome that risk as well in the forecast. So for instance, if we're under forecasting, we might buffer safety stock like we're doing here. If we're over forecasting, we might reduce safety stock. So taking all of these 5 factors into consideration, we have calculated for this item in this location, the optimal safety stock days is 5, and this is a dynamic calculation. So most people don't really update their min-max levels that often. If it happens once a year, that's usually quite a lot. Here we're calculating that minimum or safety stock level on a daily basis to try and find the optimal safety stock level all the time, and try and keep our stock levels as low as possible through that. So this is really where the magic happens with the level calculation on every single item. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do, once we understand what that safety stock is, that calculation that we were just talking about, we're then going to build our levels on top of that. So safety stock, which is our minimum level, plus a lead time will be our reorder point. So as we sell through and we hit this point over here, a lead time before we want the delivery to arrive, and best case scenario, the delivery will arrive just as we hit our safety stock levels. But if anything goes wrong, obviously that's why we have the safety stock. So let's say best case scenario, it arrives there. It then needs to take us back up to maximum. So our maximum is safety stock plus replenishment cycle, because whenever we buy, we want to buy a replenishment cycle's worth of stock. And our order up to, so that we know when we get to that reorder point, how much we need to order. The calculation is lead time plus safety stock plus replenishment cycle. And I'll show you a little bit about these calculations in the system as well, but just so that you understand what we're trying to achieve with these calculations that you see here on the right-hand side. Okay, so now we understand how important the item is. We have built the best forecast we possibly can. We've worked out the optimal safety stock level, and we've built min-max levels on top of that, so that we have a plan going forward on where our optimal stock levels are. Okay. Just to chat a little bit about central distribution, if there is a multi-warehouse setup, we do classify and forecast on every single item in every location. So an item in one location might be a red item with an intermittent demand forecast, and in this area over here, it might be a fast-moving item with a seasonal forecast, and it might be different in each one of those locations. We will do individual forecasting on each of those items, and we will roll those forecasts up onto central store, so that when you're purchasing from central store or manufacturing in central store, you know exactly what the demand is for direct demand on that warehouse, as well as warehouse demand from the other warehouses that the central store might be supplying. We also take lead times into consideration from central store to each of those locations, and different policies in each of those locations. Based on those roll-up, we will then suggest manufacturing or suggest purchase orders on raw materials, taking the lead time from supply into consideration as well. So the whole supply chain is planned for, just depending on how we set up the structures of that central warehouse. So very strong in distribution if they're multi-warehouses that we need to distribute to. As far as the bill of material is concerned, or manufacturing, if there is a bill of material in the accounting system, we read that bill of material, we forecast on the finished goods in a made to stock situation. We'll forecast on the finished goods. We will then blow those forecasts into the bill of material, so that we know what the demand is from that bill of material in sub-assembled items all the way down to the lowest level of raw material or components that are used in that bill of material. And we plan all the way through down to the lowest level. So we're a great help in the manufacturing space as well, because this is really very difficult to do, or pretty much impossible to do in a spreadsheet. Okay, so yeah, those are the things that we do in the background. I'm going to just go over to the application itself. So as I said, this is a cloud application. You can see here the dashboards that come up when I log in. We log into this just as you would a Gmail, with an email address and a password, and you then have access to this on any device, anytime, anywhere. I'm just going to move into one of the items so that we can see all that stuff that I was talking about, how that's all put together. Okay, so here we have an item. It is a central store item, so we're looking at it from central store, and we can see over here information like average cost, volume and weight, stock on hand. That information we'll be pulling from the ERP system or the financial system. Okay, here we have the auto classification, and this item is being classified as BM in that matrix that we were talking about. The supply information and groupings are all coming from your financial system as well. Okay, on the right over here, we can see the forecasting happening. So the computer forecast is no trend with seasonality. So you can see some seasonal spikes over there in blue, and the brown spikes, the sales forecast going forward. You can also see when I hover over that, we can see the sales history there for the last 12 months in blue. We can see sales forecast, which is direct demand on central warehouse. Remember, this is a central warehouse setup. And then distribution forecast is the other forecasts that have been rolled up from the other locations onto central store, so that we have a total forecast and we make sure we're manufacturing or purchasing for that. Okay, so there's the two demand streams that we see over there, the forecasting happening quite well. Here's my safety stock calculation for this item. You can see the fill rate, the replenishment cycle, and the lead time. You can see my supplier risk and my forecast risk calculations. And we've calculated 14 days worth of safety stock for this item at central store. And then those calculations that I was talking about, lead time plus safety stock to get to my reorder point, add my replenishment cycle to get to my order up to, so that when that order comes in, we stay within that min-max range. Okay, so there's the plan. We've put all the plan together with all our calculations over there. Once we've done that, we then go and have a look at what's actually going on in the financial system. Where is your stock at the moment? So at the moment, that's my stock on hand. There are some customer orders that are outstanding, so back orders that need to be fulfilled. So my available stock level is 8,311. I've got 59,760 on order from Supplier, or in this case, being manufactured, because this is a manufactured item. So my net stock position is 68,071. Okay, so this is the magic number that we're calculating all the time with all this information. And based on that number, we want to answer two questions. And this is really the fundamentals of the system. When you log into the system, there are two things that you really want to know. The first thing is, do I need to place an order? And you can see there's no recommended order here. And that is because my net stock position is much higher than my reorder point. So only when I got to 19,294 would we potentially recommend an order or a manufacturing run on this item. Okay, the next thing that I want to know is what's gone wrong with the plan. So we've created this amazing plan for this item, but based on my stock position at the moment, is there anything that I need to fix on this item? And this item at the moment is okay, which means it's running according to plan, but it could potentially be a an excess stock item where we're tying up too much cash. It could be a surplus order where we're purchasing more than we actually require. It could be a stock out where we're losing money, or a potential stock out coming at us that we want to give you warning about. So the statuses over here might change as we're going along. Okay. So now we've calculated those two, and those are the questions that we really want to answer. We can see at the bottom here, there's a whole bunch of information like sales history and my forecast for this item. We also will show you how many days you were stocked out in every month. That might have affected the sales for that month, and obviously because of that might affect the forecast going forward. We do have a new forecasting engine that we've been building for the last year and a half, which we're probably going to be rolling out at the beginning of next year. And that actually compensates for this type of stuff. So it might look at how many days you were stocked out, and calculate what you might have sold in that month, and then smooth out these dips based on the amount of stock out days. So we are also working on trying to get a bit more clever on our forecasting to get those forecasts more accurate as well. Okay. A lot of information at the bottom here, my forecast shots to see how my forecasting is tracking, my purchase orders. So in this case, there's that purchase order that we were showing at the top there. My supplier performance, and there's no data on this one. Customer orders, those are the back orders that are outstanding against this item. My bill of materials, so this is a manufactured item, as I said. So there's my, this is only a one level bill of materials. So there's my finished goods. There's the percentages that are used, raw material or components that are used to make this finished good. And I can also drill down into those components and have a look at the bill of material demand on those items. So for instance, this item, you can see it's a CH item, which is a fast moving low value item. So it's a component in a bill of material of an item that is quite important. You can see its forecast over there. This is going to have BOM forecast, which is bill of material forecast. It's also got its own forecast based on direct sales. So this item is sold directly as well as used in the bill of material. So we'll double up that demand. And also this item is used in a whole bunch of different bills, and all the demand from those bill of material items have been pushed down onto this raw material so that we understand how much we need for any of the demand coming at this item. So as I said, very powerful when it comes to planning on bill of materials and manufacturing. Okay, so that's the bill of materials, central warehouse. So if we want to see what the recommended orders are going to be for the next 12 months from the other stores that we're supplying from central store, you can see the numbers over there. And that is how we got to that total that we saw in the forecast, rolled up distribution forecast for the next 12 months. Okay, so now you can see how all these things are put together. Here's our projection. So that's our plan going forward. And the reason why it said we were okay at the moment is because we're in that gray area over there, which is our optimal stock levels. So you can see our optimal levels going into the future in gray. We can see that big purchase order that's coming in. We can see where we are and where we expect to be. In fact, we might just stock out of this item before the next order comes in. So it might turn into a potential stock out once this order over here is received. And then we have our suggested orders going forward, which are going to try and keep you inside that gray area. Obviously, with a seasonal item, we're going to have bigger orders in the up seasons with bigger safety stock levels to overcome risk. In lower seasons, we're going to have smaller orders and lower safety stock levels so that we can keep your stock levels as low as possible, as I said, with the highest full performance out of the item. You can see here, there's our suggested orders, when we're going to ask you to order, how much we're going to ask you to order, and when we expect it to arrive. So that's our plan going into the future. Okay. There's also comments that you can leave on the item, so that follows the items around wherever you are in the application. So if you overrode a forecast or you change something on the item, you can leave a note for yourself or for other people so that they can see why that happened. There's also no limit on the number of users that use the application. So you can have everybody from the CEO to the salespeople and the planners and everybody log in if required. Okay. The other thing that I want to show you on this is the measurement of my full performance. Okay. So what we do is we have a look at a 30-day rolling history. We have a look at our stock levels, and a percentage of the stock in, stock out days is our full performance. So in this case, you can see even though we got quite low over there a month ago, we never stocked out. So we have 100% full rate on this item against a target of 90. All right. But if we were stocked out 15 days and stocked in 15 days, that would be a 50% full rate calculation. Okay, so that's the full performance calculation. So all of this stuff is happening automatically in the background. And we then, like I said, answering two questions. The first is, do I need to recommend an order? Do I need to purchase? And what is the status of the item? Okay, so let's start first with the status of the item. So this item is okay, but as I said, the statuses might change. If I go into my dashboard, that's really where we're dealing with those items. So on a daily basis in the dashboard, we want to know where the problem items are, and we want you to be able to deal with them. We also very firmly believe in this 80-20 rule. So we're going to bring the 20% that have the biggest effect on your business to the front and ask you to deal with those so that you could have a big effect on the business without spending hours and hours trying to find the right items. So what we do here, the top 3 KPIs, we're trying to manage your inventory levels. How do we reduce your inventory? So we're having a look at your inventory amount. These guys are at 26 million. They've got a model stock of 9.5, which is midway between your min-max level. They've got 7.8 million rands worth of excess, so they're tying up a lot of cash. We've calculated the maximum level, and any items that are over that maximum, we see as cash being tied up that you could release back into the business. So how can we work on this excess and try and bring that down? There are 382 items over here. Obviously, you're not going to work through 382 items in a day or a week or even a month. So what we do is we bring the top 5 in each of these sections to the fore for you to deal with. Here we can see 1.9 million of that 7.8 is sitting in just these 5 items. So how can we be effective very quickly in trying to decrease our stock value? You can also see the color coding come up over here, so it's a lot easier to make decisions on which ones to tackle. If I look at excess, I obviously wouldn't be that perturbed with green items because they are valuable items, fast-moving items in the business, and we know we're going to sell through them. But I would be very worried about red items because I know that those are slow-moving items, and it's going to tie up cash for a long time. So even if I just deal with these 2 items over here, there's 500,000 rand there and 300,000 rand there that I could release back into the business. Okay, so very, very quickly, you can be very effective in the business. Surplus orders. So what this means is that the manufacturing or the orders from supplier are surplus to requirement, and that might add to my excess if it lands or if it's the manufacturing run is finished. So can we do something that's early warning on excess that's coming your way? Can we do something about those orders or that manufacturing run to make sure that we don't increase our excess? Okay, so early warning on creating more excess in the business and dealing with that. 2.5 million of the 3.6 is sitting in just these top 5. So again, you could be very effective very quickly. The second 3 KPIs talk really about your full performance. And here we're trying to reduce your stockouts. So here we're driving down your inventory. At the same time, we want to increase your service levels. At the moment, they're at 92% with a target of 94 across the board for the business. They started at 74, so they're doing pretty well. They stocked out of 302 items. It's costing them 300,000. Again, the top 5 over there, which makes up nearly all of it, 276,000, are sitting over there. Here, green items obviously more important than red items. How do we try and expedite orders to make sure we get these items in and we don't lose more sales? And then early warning on potential stock out. So we might have stock on order or stock being manufactured, but the demand has risen on these items to the point that there's going to be a window period where we stock out before that delivery arrives or that manufacturing run is complete. So 8 items over there that are potentially lost sale value of 137,000. Can we do something about expediting that to make sure that we don't stock out? Okay, so this really is your exception dashboard. You can drill into these to get full reports. So for instance, on an excess, I might want to look at just the red items in a specific grouping, or whatever is coming out of your financial system, we can filter by. We can apply that filter. It'll then show me the top red items with the top value at the top. and I can chip away at some of these red items and try and release money back into the business. Okay, so very easy to drill down into lists, very easy to drill down into the items, and then also everything is has the ability to be exported into a CSV, into Excel for further reporting or analysis if required. Okay. A couple other things that we have on the dashboard: any new items that are created in the accounting system will be boxed into the new item section over here. We obviously want to know what to do with those items because they don't have any sales history and we can't create a forecast. If you have items that supersede each other, so for instance, like a Galaxy S9 being replaced by an S8 being replaced by an S9, we can take the history from the S8 and we can use that to forecast on the S9 if we think it's going to behave in the same way. So any replacement items, we can actually build a forecast on the previous item's sales history. If it's part of a bill of material, obviously we need to know that, and that bill of material link needs to be there so we can start forecasting on that. And if it's a brand new item, we want you to give us a forecast, even if it's just a 3 month forecast that we'll track against until we get enough sales history to do our own forecasting. So any new items will be put into that box over there. This block over here really just shows you the health of the inventory. We can see here, obviously in this business, the biggest issue is excess and surplus orders, not so much the stockouts and potential stockouts. And this changes from business to business. You know, sometimes you have too much stock of the things you don't need. Sometimes you have too little stock of the things you do need. So this might vary, but here we can definitely see they're tying up a lot of cash and they've got a lot of excess that they need to deal with. And then the data purity dashboard. So obviously information is very important. The data coming out of the accounting system is very important to us. And we track that on a daily basis to see how good the information is. And obviously the better the information, the better results are going to be in the application. So we're always tracking that. Things like overdue purchase orders, cost prices, selling prices less or equal to zero, overdue customer orders, all that type of stuff might skew our information. So we're tracking that all the time and trying to keep that as up to date as possible, as correct as it possibly can be. Okay, so that was question number one. What is the status of the item and what do I need to fix? So these are the exception reporting that we're going to work with on a daily basis. The second question really is, what do I need to order? So we spoke about those orders, and typically in spreadsheets, it takes quite a long time to work through all the items and then arrive at a recommended order, taking all these things into consideration. Obviously, we are doing all of this in the background. So as soon as an item hits its reorder point, it's automatically put onto a supplier order. So you can see the suggestions here per supplier for everything that we see has gone through its reorder point. It needs to either be manufactured or needs to be purchased from the supplier. So we can see those listed over there. You can see the statuses of the items that we're wanting you to purchase. We can see the product count, the quantity. We can even see the volumetrics and weight if that information is in the accounting system. Okay, and for those guys that import, we can start getting really clever about helping you containerize orders to get to a certain volume or certain weight when you're placing the order. Okay, so there's my order schedule. You can see my whole order book with the totals there at the bottom for central store at the moment. So if I go and choose this supplier and I say create order, it will then by line item give me all the items that have gone through the reorder point for this specific supplier. So we can see the items over there. I'm just going to reclassify. Um, the headings are like pivot tables, so you can reclassify any way you want to. I've just brought all the more important or the green items to the top so that we can see those items. And then also just to show you that we can take things like minimum order quantities into consideration and also order multiples, so pack sizes and that type of stuff we can take into consideration as well when we create the optimal order. So for instance, I'm just trying to find one that would be okay, so this one over here, you can see my ideal order is 243, but I've got a minimum order quantity of 1,000, so we are recommending 1,000 of this item. So we're always buying up to that MOQ if there are MOQs that are driven by your suppliers. Also in the multiples, we will round up or down to whatever the multiple is and try and find the best order for that item in every location. If I look at the line item over here, I can see the forecasting happening. I can see all the policies, lead time, safety, stock replenishment, all those calculations are there. I can see the auto classification happening. I can see my status. This item is stocked out. Okay. I can move it to another supplier if I'm purchasing from another supplier. So all this stuff is being calculated automatically. In the middle over here, I can see my recommended order and my last cost, and I can see my total value, total volume, and total weight for this line item, as well as at the bottom, the totals for the whole order. Okay. So in the case of a container, let's say my container load is 40,000 cubic meters, and I'm at 37,621 over here. Typically, what businesses do is they would find an important item if they knew what that was, a fast moving item that they knew they were going to sell, and they would increase this order to get to a certain weight or volume. We don't want you to do that because we know that you're going to be pushing that item into excess, which we don't really want. So what we do is we have an add button over here, um, where you can choose what we call top-up items. So you can select other items from the supplier, or you could go to top-up items. Now, top-up items are items that have gone through their maximum level, but they haven't hit their reorder point yet. So what we want to do is we want to find those items and top them up to maximum again and fill the container with those items. Okay, so here I'm going to say top-up items. It's going to pull items that can be topped up. You can then go and input a target, either volume, weight, cost, units, whatever it is that you need to do. In this case, I'm going to say volume, and I need to get to a container load of 40,000. It will automatically pull items from that list and get as close as it can to that 40,000. I can then add that to the order, and I then have a containerized order by volume for this supplier. So it makes the calculation to get to the right size order a lot easier. And again, like I said, at a push of a button, we want to try and give you the best possible order we can. From here, you would then download. That would then be push out at a CSV format. And most of the financial systems in Sage, we do have import templates. Obviously, the Sage partner would then help automate the import of those templates as a purchase recommendation or as a works order. And in the case of an IBT, we can see these are my orders at Central Store. But if I wanted to see what the transfer was to small branch one, you can see that I've got suppliers. There's no suppliers listed because they don't buy anything from suppliers directly. They buy everything from warehouse. So if I go to warehouse, there's my transfer from Central Store to this store that I can open up. It'll then give me that transfer to that store that I can then download and import as a warehouse transfer or a IBT requisition in the accounting system. Okay, so that's how we close the loop on the orders and the works orders and the transfers to warehouse. Okay, so that really is the story. There's a lot of stuff that I can still show you, but I actually just wanted to move through the basics of how we get to produce those orders and how we get to produce the dashboards and the exception reporting that we want to work on. Just to touch on a couple of other things, we do have some additional modules that we have added to the application. I just want to see, oh no, this isn't going to open up. It'll give me an explanation of what it is. We have the projection module. So the projection module really takes those forecasts and the projected orders that we've built, and it builds a summary uh, of our stock into the future. So I can see my inventory levels and where they're going to be 12 months from now. I can see my demand and how that's going to change. My full performance, this looks pretty good. We're going to get up to 99% in a year's time. My stock turns, my recommended orders, so I can see what I'm going to be spending, and then firm orders as well as firm receipts as well as recommended receipts into the future. So it becomes quite powerful from an analytics point of view. Also, planning cash flow and that kind of stuff for the business. So we have that as an additional module. I'm not sure whether the supplier module is on here, but we also have a supplier module, which is an additional module to the standard application. And what that does is it rolls up the supply performance that we were measuring at a item level, rolls that up by supplier, so we can see the overall performance of a supplier, what products are supplied, what the inventory value is, and the safety stock value that we're holding. The supplier risk in the middle over here. So what is the average safety stock days across the board for the items from the supplier? What is your average risk? What is my average offset days? And what is my average lead time across those items? Okay, so there's my supplier risk. And then I can have a look at historical orders, overdue orders, open orders, and future orders for the supplier. And we can get into more detail for those specific things. We can drill down, have a look at tables, all that kind of stuff as well. So when it comes to supplier performance, if there are SLAs in place with suppliers or you're negotiating with a supplier, these stats will come in real handy when doing that. Okay, so those are two additional modules. And then also just to show you in the application, because this is a completely online application, our installation is done online, our onboarding is done online, our support is done online. We have a support chat over here, and you'll see we have a lot of people online to answer a question. If you start a new conversation, one of those people will see the conversation. You can see we've got Kevin who's in Australia, John's here in South Africa, and Valerie's in South Africa. They will be able to support you. They'll be able to see what's on your screen, and they'll be able to help you with whatever it is that you're busy with. We also have tutorials embedded in the application. So if I wanted to see how excess is created and what I can do about it, there'll be a 5-minute tutorial explaining how that happens. So wherever you see little question marks in the application, they're all over the place. They're tutorials to help you along. The idea behind this really is to get people embedded in the application, get people to learn as they're using it, rather than sitting in classroom trainings and forgetting most of what they've learned as they go along. Okay, so that's the application. It, as I said, integrates with most of the Sage, or all of the Sage ERP systems or financial systems, and then does the planning and forecasting for you and gives you optimal, or calculates optimal levels and produces optimal replenishment orders to make sure that you have the right amount of stock in the right place at the right time. Okay. I think we will be sending this out to people. If you do have any questions, please contact About IT. They'll be happy to put you in touch with me. If you want to get into a bit more of an in-depth demo of the application, I'm happy to come out and meet with you and do that as well. But yeah, thanks very much for joining me, and have a great day.